Check 1, 2.
Hello everyone and welcome to Travelpreneurship, the fifth show on how travel and entrepreneurship work hand in hand. Our goal with this show is to introduce you to people who have found success while traveling and give you the courage to be bold and live an adventurous life. Let's move.
You keep shouting so high when you do the intro and then moving away a little bit. But anyway, today's guest is a person who dropped his high-paying job at IBM in order to take on the call to adventure and travel Europe for 7 months. In this interview, Mathew shares with us how he found success with his blog, how he was able to then leverage it in order to build a career in London, and why travel changed the way he looked at life. Mathew, thank you so much for coming on board our show.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. We was listening to TED Talk show. We was really impressed. Well done. You mentioned that you was working for 5 years in a big software company, IBM. Why did you wasting 5 years before said yes to the adventure call? What was holding you back?
Yeah, what was holding me back?
Yeah,
well, there's a lot holding me back or someone back. For one, I didn't really know what I wanted to do next. Mm-hmm. So I knew that, and I wasn't that clear. Things were not working for me there, but I wasn't clear on what I wanted to do next. So that was one of the big things that was holding me back. And also, I think the pain wasn't hard enough yet. It wasn't acute enough pain to leave. So it wasn't quite time. Even though I wanted to do something different, it wasn't it wasn't miserable. Mm-hmm. So it was just kind of like not that stagnation. Great, not that bad, but just kind of humming along. So yeah, I think the pain wasn't that great, and I didn't know what I wanted to do instead. Those are probably the two big things.
What was the trigger?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately, I had a friend who passed away in a car accident, and that was kind of the ultimate trigger for me. And she got killed in a car accident, and it was like in that it was basically that same moment that I found out about it. I had a voice kind of enter my head, just saying, "What are you waiting for? Life, there's never a perfect time to do the things that you want to do. But now is maybe as perfect as any." So yeah, it kind of hit me then. And that's when I really decided to take a bigger leap.
To dial back a little bit then, what made you want to become an engineer in that case, initially?
Yeah, well, I was always good at math and science. Mm-hmm. So when you're 16, 17, when you need to choose, what do you study at university? At least in the school I went to in the States, there was no question. You go to university. That's the next step. I think things are changing now, but at that point, I went to a pretty good high school, and that was just the next step. And so I was, because I didn't know what to do, teachers, parents, they say, well, you're good at math and science, and engineering is an excellent field. And I enjoyed it enough. I enjoyed the analytical side of things. And so I started to look at engineering schools. And so that's where basically you just have to choose something at that age. And that was what I chose.
You mentioned there you think things are changing now in terms of education. Can I ask, what do you think is changing? How is it changing?
University isn't necessary. I think it's still very common, at least in the States and in Europe and UK. But I'm seeing more and more people choose not to go to university or exploring different things instead. And just the cost of it, especially in the US, is incredibly high. So then if you don't have the backing of it, parents or some sort of scholarship, you're then take out a loan, which then you're paying off for the next 10, 20 years, which means you probably have to get a job that maybe you don't really like so you can pay off the loan. And meanwhile, the world's moved on. So the things that you learn in university, they're not actually preparing you for operating in the real world. I just think the world is moving a lot quicker these days. And I think the university system is at risk of being an outdated system.
A lot of your work are relating to teaching now, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What are you teaching exactly? Why for you invest in education, it's important?
So one of the things I teach is career change and kind of helping people when you don't know what you want to do, how do you figure out what's next? So career change is one thing that I do a lot of workshops on. Entrepreneurship, if you have an idea, business idea, side project, helping people get clear on that and begin to start that. So those are the two big things that I've focused on. And now I'm, as a freelance facilitator, because through doing those programs, I learned a skill set, which is how to design and deliver workshops and programs. And so then I started to pitch myself as that service because I really love having to teach something or help someone learn something, whatever the topic. And so I started to pitch myself to other organizations. So that's what I do a lot of now too. So it could be anything. It could be, just like management, leadership training. It could be storytelling. It could be anything at all. Blogging. So it's kind of a creative challenge. You have to help someone learn something. So how can I share my knowledge or learn really quickly and design it in a way that I can help someone else learn it too?
Yeah. So Mathew, you mentioned that currently you're living in London. Or are you? Sorry, you're staying in London. I'm not sure if you're living there. But is travel still a big part of your world, a part of your day to day? Do you incorporate that with your work? And if so, how would you do it?
In 2014, when I came here to work with Escape the City, I decided I basically, this felt like an adventure. It wasn't travel per se, but I was living in a new city, London. Yes, same language, but it's a very international city. It's, well connected to Europe and other parts of the world. So I when I moved to Escape, I was actually focused on this project. And so travel became less, not less important, but it kind of became a secondary focus to actually building something and working with a team on a problem that I felt passionate about. That being said, I still try to prioritize travel. It's still a part of, what I love and get a lot out of. But I think I do it in different ways. So I mentioned before we started recording, but where I am right now, I'm in the countryside about 3 hours west of London, and with a website called Trusted House Sitters. My girlfriend Mel and I have, over the last year, we've house sat at about 5 different places around the UK, where we'll go somewhere for 1 to 2 to 3 weeks at a time and just kind of live like we're living in someone's home, looking after their pets. So kind of the travel looks different.
Yeah, by any chance, Mathew, do you have some other tips like that to travel for cheap, or how to find another way to save a little bit of money?
This is becoming my number one tip lately, is Trusted House Sitters. Because it's kind of like, it's amazing. I mean, if you can, I think getting your first house sit is probably the most difficult, but if you can do that, then it kicks off because you get reviewed and all these things. So a little tip to get your first house sit, I would find a place that maybe is in a less popular location. So we didn't do London, we did somewhere like in the countryside. And they were also, it was their first time doing Trusted House Sitters. So we kind of just said, hey, we're new to this, you're new to this too. Getting a lot of applications yet. And so anyway, so we put pictures up there and we did a Skype call with them too. So they got to meet us before they decided. So we kind of, and then that kicked it off. So that's kind of a little tip with Trusted House Sitters. But yeah, I would say this is a great tool. When I was traveling, this didn't exist. I was using either Airbnb or or couch surfing or hostels. But geez, I think it's a lot. There's a lot more opportunities to stay places nowadays. So yeah, this would be my number one tip right now.
We ask you this question because a lot of people who want to travel, the problem, it's always money. So if we can give them the tools to tell them, okay, here's what you can do to travel to the lowest cost, it will be very great for the audience.
Yeah. Well, this is a great one. There's a fee that's maybe like $100 for a year. But other than that, it's free. There is responsibility, so you have to actually take care of someone's home and their pets. So there's responsibility there. But it's excellent if you want to feel like a local, but also kind of stay put for some place for 1 week to several months. There's some amazing places on there.
Yeah, I mean that's your biggest expense, so it's a good one to find to reduce or completely get rid of.
You mentioned that you traveled for 7 months. How did you afford to travel for this amount of time? Did you save money before traveling? Did you, I don't know, tell me.
Yeah. I mean that's the benefit of having a job like I had at IBM is because I was spending a lot less than I was making because I wasn't, I didn't really live a frivolous lifestyle. So I had a chunk of money that I was saving up. So that was basically the number one thing is I had some money, but as soon as I knew I was going on that trip, I was like, okay, I have a goal, and I just started cutting everything that wasn't leading to that goal. So I was able to increase the amount that I saved leading up to that trip. So part of it was money saved, that money.
Yeah, you made it a priority, and I think that's the thing. Most people look at travel as a cost or as an expense, where really, I mean, if you do it right, like how you did it, you're not just going about, just partying, but you're trying to keep your finger to the pulse of culture. You're trying to learn about the people there. It really becomes an investment. And I can see now from this discussion that you're building your career in London, so to speak. You've been there for over 5 years. Did you ever see that happening before you'd left for Europe? Was that ever in your plan?
No, not at all. I mean, I actually on that trip, I met the guys at Escape who I ended up working with. But, it's just because I loved what they were doing and I wanted to meet them. But I had no intention of coming here full time and living here. Actually, when I first came here to work with them, it was still on a project. I was like, oh, I'll come here for a few months, see how it goes. And then left and then came back and then never really left 5 years later. So yeah, no, and that's a good point you said that, because what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to go and travel and then come back and say, oh wow, I had a really great time, but I didn't really do anything. And so I had projects I was working on. So that's when I was doing my blog, I was writing, I was experimenting with photography, videography. I was reading a bunch of books. So it wasn't like an endless party for me. It's not what I wanted. I was trying to just let myself do things that interested me because I was trying to figure out my next step. And so it was I call it a deliberate journey. It was very deliberate. It was an investment in myself.
So, sorry, you mentioned it helped you figure out your next step. So you were doing these projects actively to see basically what will stick, what you wanted to do in the long term?
Yeah, so I wanted to begin to build an asset. And for me, that asset was my blog. But also, I guess what I was doing, and I didn't really realize it, but I was building other skill sets like writing, communication, even just how to run a blog, how to build it. That was some of my income, a small amount, but when I came back, I was helping other people build their blogs. So that was some of it. So I had a skill set.
So you were making some money with your blog, maybe not like thousands, right, a month, but you found other ways to leverage that skill then?
Yeah, I did get hired out to do some blogs. It wasn't a lot, but it was a little bit when I came home. But I've never really, and I made this choice, to not really try to make money directly for my blog. Although I think every opportunity I have, paid opportunity and unpaid, but things I enjoy, was because of my blog. So it came because people heard of me, found me. The TEDx, the organizers had been reading my blog and they invited me to do the TED Talk. So, which then led to other things. So yeah, so it never became I never tried to like, okay, how can I put ads on this? How could I do this? Some people do donate. I have a newsletter that I put out. Some people will donate, but I've tried to not make it something that I need to make money from, and instead be a platform to just communicate what I'm doing and what I believe and what I care about.
Are there daily action that you took to end up where you are as an entrepreneur?
Oh, there are the dogs.
Yeah. So I would say, yeah.
Okay. Hey.
My question.
Okay.
I heard the question. There's the dogs.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just say I actually didn't really know I loved writing. So I wouldn't say I started doing something I loved. I started doing something I was curious about. So it wasn't like a passion. I was like, I don't know where it came from, but I just thought I want to try to write. And yeah, so while I was traveling, I spent a lot of time in coffee shops just writing. And so I guess my practice was when I started my blog, and I emailed friends, family, colleagues and said, hey, I'm writing this blog. I'm not going to email you individually to say, here's how my trip's going. Instead, if you want to hear about it, just subscribe, and then I'll let you know every week what's going on with me. And so maybe 40, 50 people subscribed, and then what I did is I convinced myself that they were waiting to hear from me every week, whether they were or not. In my head, I convinced myself of that. And so every Thursday night, I would commit to sending a blog post.
So it was your daily action.
Some weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was writing, and so it became a weekly thing. Some weeks I missed it, but more or less, I think that year I started, I probably have written the most I have in the 7 years since, like year basis. So just as my priority has gone, the writing's still important, but other things are, the writing is part of that, but I do other things too. But that I was like, put myself on deadline. Every week I'm going to ship something.
So you started doing this blog now. You made a commitment to ship every Thursday, and you said it was the most you ever written was within that first year. But how long did it take before something clicked? Before that blog started paying off. And I don't necessarily mean an ad revenue or anything like that, but maybe as a door, it was a way that opening a door to an opportunity or something along those lines.
Yeah, there was a couple things happen within the first 5 months of me writing. Some of them were more like moral victories and things that just kept me going mentally. So one of them was I was reading books, and so one of the blog posts I would write, the themes would be about the books I'm reading. So I would read a book, and then I would write about it and what it means to me in my pilgrimage, as I called it.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And one of those was a book by Paulo Coelho, who wrote The Alchemist.
Oh, yeah.
And he's a Brazilian author.
Santiago.
He's written a bunch of other books. Yeah. And so Elelf was a book that he had written and was published when I was traveling, and I was reading it, and I wrote a blog post about it and shared it, and I shared it on Twitter. I shared it with him, and I said, hey, thanks for writing this book. Here's what it means to me on my current journey. And he ended up tweeting it out to all of his followers. And that was a big moment for me because it kind of gave me a little validation to say, hey, if this author that I really admire thought my work was good enough to share, even if it was promoting his book, it still gave me like a nudge to be like, hey, keep going with this thing. So that was kind of one of my early wins that for me, it was just like kind of a validation that I felt like maybe I needed at that point. There were other things, because these guys that I met at Escape the City, I think the other thing is they one of the founders started subscribing and reading my blog and sending it out to his team.
That's great.
And that was a big thing for me too, because it's a big difference between someone who's talking about something and someone who's doing something. Mm-hmm. And so I wasn't talking about, writing a blog, or I was doing it, so, and I was doing this journey. I wasn't talking about it, I was doing it. And so this is one thing I find a lot holds people back from doing these different things, whether it's starting a blog or whatever it is. I think what they don't realize is just the starting of it. It's like, I don't know, it's a leap. Even if what you're writing isn't very good, it's such a leap versus someone who's like thinking about it and talking about it. Mm-hmm. And so I just was able to enter into conversations because I could link to my blog. I could say, hey, I'm working this thing. People could hear in my head. I was able to have conversations with people about things. So, yeah.
So maybe say it less talk, more do.
And it also just goes to show how, the amount of people you reach is nowhere near as important, right, as who you actually reach. I mean, that one person that worked at that company started sharing his blog posts with his employees, and lo and behold, now you're a collaborator working with them as a contractor, essentially, right, as a freelancer.
Yeah, and I helped them because when they were running a job board at the time, mm-hmm. which is basically helping people, becoming a platform where people could find cool job opportunities. And what I came on to do is help them start a school, because I was already writing about this stuff. I was already experiencing it. So they said, hey, Matt, you're already kind of thinking about this and talking about it and doing it. Do you want to help us help other people do it? And so, yeah, through that blog, I was able to kind of build that connection, build that trust, build that eventually expertise.
And so tell me, what is the future now for you in London? Are you planning to continue work as a freelancer, or do you have any ideas of starting a business in the future?
So I was actually full-time at Escape until 2017. So I've been freelancing for about a couple years almost. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm liking the freelance lifestyle. I like the work that I'm doing. Working with a bunch of different clients on a bunch of different things, whether it's career change or actually helping organizations transition into new world of work, or helping companies retain people. So kind of these are the things I like to do. So yeah, I'm going to continue with that. I've also started a group in London for writers, and we've started an event series and workshops. It's called the London Writers Salon. And we do monthly interviews with authors, screenwriters, poets, bloggers. So it's an event series that you can come to. Nice. For who are writers. And we also do master classes. So we'll invite agents, editors. I did one on blogging, so more in-depth workshops. So that's kind of my newest project, is London Writers Salon.
What would be the end message that you can share with us and with the audience?
I would say it's both a head and a heart decision. And so the head decision is, for me, it was making sure I had enough money, making sure I had enough of a plan in that, okay, here's my money and it can last me this much. So whatever you feel like you need to get to help like feel a little bit more confident in what you're doing, make sure you do that. So whatever that is for you, like, okay, I need a certain amount in the bank or whatever it is, that helped me give me the confidence to then do it, because I knew I could survive for like a year without having to work. So that was important. But then I guess the other part is the heart too. And, so when I went on my travel, I was 27, 28. And I thought I was kind of old. Like, now I'm 35 and I'm like, holy shit, I was so young. Like, so just you're so much younger than you think you are, you know? So even if you think like, oh, at 28, yeah, uni, like I should be a professional, like, yeah, we're going to be living until we're maybe, yeah, well, there's a lot of research being done, and there's a book in particular called The 100-Year Life, and by a London Business School professor, and she's saying, basically, people born today, or you and I, may be living until we're 100, which means the system that we're growing up in, retiring at 65, is basically built on the idea that you're probably going to die at like 80, 85. Mm-hmm. But if we're living longer, it means we'll be working longer. And so actually, we have a whole lot of time here. So I'm 35. I maybe have like 50 more years of quality work and quality life. So there's so much time. So these little, what you feel like are little hiccups or whatever, what if you do this year, it's going to all come out in the wash. And so I think the biggest regret is to, if you look at that age of 85 and then look backwards and say, would I regret doing this thing? I find having that perspective of kind of, there's a lot of time.
Yeah.
And so if you feel like you're too old, you know, it's going to be, that 7 months I was traveling, it feels like nothing now because so much has happened. But at the time, it was, you know, loads of time. But so anyway, I would tell myself that like, you're so young, you could like screw up for the next 15 years of your life and you could still probably be okay.
Well, that's reassuring.
But what happened is actually I was building a life that then laid the groundwork for all the work that I'm doing now. So it was so important, and I love what I'm doing now, and I'm enjoying it. So there will never be a perfect time, but now is probably as perfect time as any.
Well, that's a great message to end with. Mathew, thank you so much for coming on our show. It's a pleasure to talk with you. And
I hope when we will come back in your 95 years old in your hospital bed, and I will ask you, did you give the best you can, Mathew? You will answer me, yes, I did, Louise.
I hope so.
For sure, no doubt about that.
And that's it for Mathew Trinetti. We hope this story brought you some value. Louise, how nice of you to join us. Where were you? Excuse me, we forgot to do the outro of the show.
I was planning to go not to the gym, to the beach. But we forget to do the outro. So I was getting ready for something else, as you can see. Anyway, we hope Mathew's story inspiring to be bold and live an adventurous life, guys.
Adios.
Adios.